So yeah, actually, Jikan, what you said was perfect. You're like, wow, AR or VR investing seems down. And I'm here to say, no, that's not true. The rumors of VR and AR investing being down is greatly exaggerated. And people are saying winter is coming, and that's the groundhog that says no. All right. So who am I? I'm Tipatat, co-founder of the VR Fund. Most importantly, I've looked at over 2,000 VR companies in the space and AR companies. And through this fund that I do with my partner Marco, we've invested in 18 so far. So everyone's seen this super data about headsets only being 6.3 million. And everyone's like, oh my gosh, that's so low. VR's over, forget it. First, there's two problems with this. One, people overhyped the VR headset numbers. There was no way that they could even make enough headsets to reach some of the crazy numbers that the analysts were predicting. And then the second thing is that headsets sold is important, but it's only one part of the data. For investors, what we really care about is software sales and how many companies can do well off of that ecosystem. And so what's really interesting is if you look at the Vive and you're saying, okay, only like 500,000 Vives have been shipped, there's at least right now over 18 Steam VR titles that have sold over $1 million in revenue. 6 of those have done over $2 million in revenue, and 3 of those have done over $3 million in revenue. And so what's really interesting is that means that there's at least over a dozen profitable VR startups, because most of the budgets on their VR titles was actually less than $1 million. And so that's really interesting. And what that means to me is there's this idea of products versus platforms. So the Nintendo Wii was probably one of the most successful game consoles, right? Sold over 100 million, right? Phenomenal for Nintendo. How many other developers actually did well on that ecosystem? EA actually did so poorly on the Wii that they skipped the Wii U. And if EA can't make money off of 100 million consoles, that's a product, not a platform. And as investors, we care about platforms. And even though it's very early, these kinds of numbers show that this is a viable platform. So the other thing is, a couple months back, everyone was like, look, VR investment's down because Q1 in 2017 is way underperforming compared to Q1 of 2016. Gloom and doom. So everyone most everyone that really knows the data knows that 800 million of that is actually one company, Magic Leap. And so that kind of skews things in an unfair way. But then if you look at Q2, kaboom, hey, it's back. Everyone, joy, celebrate, yay, because of 2 investments, one in Improbable and one in Unity. But the general trend, though, is that don't look at these numbers so closely and freak out, okay? Everything's going well. And what's really interesting to do is look at these numbers. So this is actually what's going on both in terms of investment and number of investments. And this is actually broken down, this is by CB Insights, it's broken down by AR and Blue, both in orange, and then pure VR in light blue. And so you can see that we're actually on pace to do better than we have done in previous years. And a lot of what's driving that is there's VR funds, VR-focused funds like mine, and what Jikan showed off, others like Presence, Colopal, and others that are relatively new. We've just started investing within the last year or two. And then there's also these incubators. So if you also Ricard's speak earlier, so the HTC Vive X program has invested in 60 companies alone. And so I don't know if CB Insight actually adds all of those companies, because that would inflate those numbers immensely. And again, there's not just that program. Now, our partners Gumi are doing VR incubators in Japan, Korea, and now in the Nordic regions. And so we're seeing a lot more opportunities for early stage VR startups. And then, of course, something that's really important to look at is what's being talked about at the major dev conferences, because you always have to follow where the developer's going. And VR, AR, and AI were the major mega trends at all of the conferences this year. So what's really interesting is that Facebook and NVIDIA both showed off what they were considering killer apps for VR. So for Facebook, of course, it's being social, sharing your photos, and having fun with your friends, communicating with your friends in VR. NVIDIA showed off Holodeck, which was their way of collaborating for work. And then Google and Microsoft were showing off what they felt like were the biggest things that they need in VR, and that's new platforms. So Google's showing off the all-in-one headset, the idea of having a mobile headset that's not tied to your mobile phone, but that is high quality and does 6 degrees of freedom. And then Microsoft, was, of course, was showing off the low-cost VR headset that's going to be, $399. And the idea is that these are tackling two of the biggest issues that a lot of people are saying are holding back VR adoption. And of course, for AR, Facebook's announced AR Kit. Apple announced, Facebook announced AR Studio, Apple announced AR Kit, Google showed off new capabilities in their Tango and the location-based services, and then Microsoft showed off collaborative working in AR. So what I wanted to talk a little bit more about was this industry landscape. A lot of you guys have seen it, but if you want to know how the industry has changed, you should look at the original one that was made a year ago, or over a year ago now, and that's the 2016, and this is the 2017 Q1. And you can see it's grown immensely. And what's most interesting too is it's really grown in the applications and content sector. That's the biggest area of growth. And of course, like you'd guess, it would be games would be one of the biggest drivers, but also location-based has grown immensely, social has grown immensely, and enterprise and healthcare have grown immensely, as well as journalism. But what's really interesting, this to me shows that we are at this point looking at really the enterprise being the biggest driver because Microsoft headsets coming out. Now what's really interesting too is to compare this to the AR landscape. And so if we look at what's going on in VR versus AR, we say that VR is looking, hardware infrastructures out there, their consumer devices, that people have, there's an audience that you can monetize, and really all they're looking for right now is the killer applications that's gonna drive mass adoption, whether that's for consumer, which would be games and enterprise, or games and entertainment, or whether it's going to be business applications for enterprise. Now on this other side, if you look at AR, it's flipped the other way, where it's mostly bottom heavy, because right now AR is still trying to figure out what's the infrastructure, what's the platform going to be. I think Tim Merrill said it when he said that right now we're in the AR platform wars time, and everyone's trying to say, hey, we're going to, developers, come develop on our AR platform. We're going to be the right one. And I want to talk really quickly about that too. So right now, everyone's super excited for this mobile device AR. And Facebook said, yes, we're making the camera the first augmented reality platform. And then Apple came out and said, well, now we're going to make iOS the largest AR platform in the world because it works with devices that people have today and not things that they have to upgrade to tomorrow. And that's really powerful. But the one thing I would say is there's something to worry about, because AR and VR is not just about what you see, but it's also how you interact with that world. And if you use the old interaction paradigms, then you won't get the true benefit of AR and VR. This is very clear when we look at, if we try to use touch or a gamepad to control VR, it's not really VR, right? One-to-one gesture control, that's really VR. And that's going to be, I believe that's going to hold true for AR. And in that same way, I think it's really going to take the head-mounted displays to unlock the potential of AR. That doesn't mean that there can't be a couple really great products done in AR on a mobile AR platform, but I don't think it's going to be the huge scalable platform that we as investors are really hoping for and looking for. So that's really all I wanted to say. I wanted to leave a lot of time for questions, so if anyone has questions, I think I can probably take one. I know we're running late.
We'll get the mic over to you now.
Okay.
Yeah, so we've got...
We've got, I think, more than one, but yeah.
Cool.
Yeah, we'll go there first.
Thanks, Tipatat. But I was wondering, especially with the Elephant Unity having shifted their mindset over to XR, how that's going to affect the statements.
I'm sorry, can you repeat that again?
With the Elephant Unity having shifted their mindset over to XR, how does that affect the categorizations you've shown here?
AR, so it's confusing. When people say XR, they just mean AR and VR, right, combined, like looking at all of that. And then when I think people say MR, except for Microsoft, most people mean MR to be what real augmented reality should be, and that's augmented reality plus computer vision. And so I feel like the terms and these ideas, the way I showed it and the way I think it's important is, VR is about immersing you into a digital world. AR is bringing the digital world into you, and that could be MR, and XR combines both of them. I think what's really important, though, is to look at what's going on right now. And that slide I had to showcase the difference between where we are with VR and AR, I would tell people, if you're a software developer wanting to create applications, VR you can monetize. It's available. It's in consumers' hands. AR is still trying to figure out what the platform is, and I think there's ARKit, AR Studio. These are all dev kits, and they're coming out. Consumer versions of this will be available in the masses, hopefully end of the year, but that's not necessarily means that it's available now. And so you can start experimenting and building with them, but just be cautious and be wary.
We'll just
Hi, Tipatat.
Sure.
I would go back to the previous talk, and the speaker said the Silicon Valley investors' culture is less prone to invest in entertainment. What do you think about that comment?
No, that's absolutely true. I think traditionally, entertainment has been a hits-driven business. Silicon Valley tends to be technology investors, and so we focus on scalable technologies. There was this change, though, especially with mobile, where game studios could create these not packaged games, but games as a platform. Games as a service. And it wasn't necessarily, hey, they were investing in Zynga because they made a cool game. They were investing in Zynga because they had daily active users of 100 million people playing their games every day. And that was interesting. And so I would say too, like the profile of games that are being invested in, or game studios that are being invested in, are very different depending on which region you go to. But one of the things that's true is when there's a platform shift, there is an opportunity for games to be investable again, and even tech investors will start investing. And you'll see, even in Silicon Valley, like not just me and my fund, we've invested in a couple of game studios like Alchemy Labs, who was recently acquired by Google. But you'll see, I believe it's been announced, but like Rec Room raised a lot of money from investors in Seattle and investors in Silicon Valley that traditionally aren't game investors. But because of what they're doing, the type of game, because they're building games as a platform, and their goal isn't necessarily to make one or two great games, but to create a platform where it's going to have the most active users in VR, that becomes very attractive for investors. So I think you have to understand what type of game company you're building and what are your goals.
Okay, and we've got just one more question at the back, and then we'll move on.
Tip, this one is about your, it's in relation to what you were saying about how the Wii had 100 million units, but not enough actual content that was being developed for it. When you're investing in these companies, do you advise them on whether or not any particular platform would be the most likely to gain traction? Because the Vive, for example, is open, whereas the Oculus is closed. And how do you see the interoperability issues in terms of advising people where to start with their product?
Sure. No, that's a really great question. One of the things too, like very early on, before any of these consoles were released, everyone's like, oh my God, mobile VR, it's going to get to scale. There's going to be so many people, it's so cheap. We should really develop on mobile. What ended up happening was, now that we have this data, there's about 5 million Gear VR. I don't know, there might be one or two mobile developers that have generated over $1 million in revenue in mobile VR, versus the 18 that have already done that just on Steam VR, not even counting PlayStation VR or Oculus. And so I say to people, don't do mobile VR, man. There's no money to be made there. Stay away from 360 video. There's no money to be made there because no one's monetizing. Follow the money. And because of that, I mean, honestly, it's tough. We don't get the data for Oculus. We don't get the data for PlayStation. But we do get the data on Steam. And what we're seeing is small indie developers are, not everyone can win. But man, like right now, you can do so much better on Steam VR than any other platform that's available today, including the mobile platforms. Like there's maybe 1,500 titles in Steam VR total. I think in a week, more titles than that are released on iOS and Android for regular mobile games, and it's just impossible to compete. So I would tell people, focus on high-end VR where you can see monetization, but really build something great. Don't just build something good.